is the Kev Baker Show. Seeking answers to age-old questions, deciphering the world painted around you by the mainstream media. This is the Kev Baker Show. And now, here is your host, Kev Baker.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. A big, huge, massive, warm welcome to this, the Wednesday night, Thursday morning broadcast of the one and only Kev Baker Show, right here on www.truthfrequencyradio.com. I'm your host, Kev Baker. Tonight I'm joined by Johnny Whistles, my usual co-host, and we have got a very special guest lined up for you tonight. But before we get there, I want to go to you, Johnny Whistles. You're going to be doing the chat tonight. And you were just talking about our guest before we went to air. Do you want to share that with the listeners, John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ben, that we were thinking about putting the cameras on, but once we've seen what you looked like, and if you seen us, you would probably send over an aid convoy to Glasgow, because we look terrible over here.
Okay. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Ben. Before we come to you, I'm just going to let John do the honours in the chat room. So, Johnny Whistles, you take it away, and then we'll get into this episode.
Well, we'll get 50 people in the chat tonight. Absolutely amazing. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll start with 17 Meat Dog, Not Boy, Alpha Dog, Amnesiac, Angel Whisperism, Ozzy Anzac, Beady Change, Chris Steiner, Cows and Nappies, Den Oldham, Marty Boy, Double Something, Flower Child, Freeman, Harold 70, IV Nurse, myself, Joe Joseph and Kev Baker, Kev T, Mad Martian, Madonna's Ex, McGrinder, Noah the Icon, Stushy, Tempest, how you doing, buddy? Gary Catlov, Penn, Just Another, Turtlehead, Harry Wiener, Longshot, Chuck Norris, 1,000 and something, and a load of announce, Kev. There's names that I can't even read there.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. So tonight, folks, I've lined up a really, really good guest for us. Tonight I'm welcoming onto the show pharmacist Ben Fuchs. Now, Ben Fuchs is a nutritional pharmacist from Boulder, Colorado, who specialises in using nutritional supplements where other healthcare practitioners use toxic pharmaceutical drugs. He looks at the human body as a healing and regenerating system designed divinely to heal and renew itself on a moment-to-moment basis. And Ben goes on to say that take charge of your biochemistry through foods and supplements rather than allow toxic prescription drugs to take charge of you. Ben, it gives me real pleasure to welcome you onto the show tonight, sir, and really looking forward to this.
Oh, I am too. Thank you guys so much, and it's an honor to be on in Scotland, and I've always, I got to tell you, I've just always loved the bagpipes.
There's something about that vibration, that frequency that comes off them, they get your goosebumps standing up.
It gives you goosebumps. That's exactly right. In fact, whenever I think of Scotland, I get goosebumps. There's something magical about that whole part of the world. Is that just me romanticizing it, or is that true?
Because it actually is. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, Scotland. It's just that we don't have the weather, Ben.
Yeah, a lot of ancient wisdom began. Weren't the Druids out there, and a lot of ancient wisdom that we consider New Age kinds of ideas? Didn't they, at least, if not started off in Scotland, weren't they developed in that part of the world?
Definitely, and my co-host here, John Sinclair, his name actually derives from the Knights.
St. Clair's.
Yes, that's the ones. Yes, so we do have some occulted knowledge on the show with us tonight, Ben. But what I wanted to start with tonight was to ask you how you got into this line of pharmaceuticals. How did you go down this road as opposed to taking the easy option and going with the big pharma? Yeah.
Well, I was always a rogue, I grew up in the 70s in the United States, and I always thought that when you're a teen, there's a certain time in your life where you get your formative ideas about how the world works. When you're young, you don't really know. When you're a baby, you don't really know what's going on, and as you get older, you start to develop ideas. But there's a point in our lives, around the age of 12 or 13 where it hits you how the world is structured, how reality is put together, not in an esoteric sense, but in a real practical sense. And my formative years came during what we call the Watergate period. I don't know if you know that. It's a period in American political history when complete faith in the honesty and integrity of the government was exploded by Richard Nixon. Do you know the period in history I'm talking about?
Yeah, certainly do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I remember I was 13 years old, and I grew up in the 60s, but my formative ideas were generated in the 1970s. So my bubble about the integrity and honesty of what we call the authorities was burst at the age of 13. And at the age of 13, I became extremely skeptical about the mainstream. I became extremely skeptical about what I was hearing. I remember the really hit home when a guy named Vice President Spiro Agnew said he was not going to resign. He was not going to resign. He was not going to resign. A week later, he resigned. And I remember, boom, you can't trust you can't trust the authorities. You can't trust the power structure. And that just it kept getting worse and worse as, Iran-Contra came around and Ronald Reagan and then George Bush and all the different scandals. And I started reading David Icke, and I started listening to Alex Jones, and I started participating in what we now know today as the conspiracy movement, or whatever kind of moniker they want to give it. But I started to understand that the world is not as we think it is. And as I was learning these things and understanding these things from a political sense, I was starting to get into chemistry. I was starting to become fascinated with chemistry. And so I decided to put my chemistry back, my love of chemistry, my fondness for chemistry. I decided to monetize it, and I thought to myself, how can I monetize it? And I said, okay, well, pharmacy. I heard pharmacists made a lot of money, and I figured, okay, well, I'm going to study pharmacy, but I'm going to study how the chemistry of food acts like drugs to the body. And I went to pharmacy school, and lo and behold, nobody was studying food, and nobody was studying diet. They were all studying pharmaceuticals, because the drug companies were funding the pharmacy schools, as I came to find out. And I started to combine these two kind of ideas: one, that you can't trust authorities, that you can't trust the power structure, that the power structure is not there to serve you. I started to combine that with this idea of healing the body through chemistry and not healing the body through being manipulated by pharmacology. So using chemistry, using friendly chemistry versus pharmacological chemistry. Pharmacological chemistry is the Darth Vader of chemistry. Friendly chemistry is your mom's apple pie. And so what I decided to do was avoid using the Darth Vader pharmacological model and go into the grandma's apple pie model of using chemistry. And keep in mind, food is chemistry every bit as much as pharmacology is chemistry, but it's a softer chemistry. It's a more benign chemistry. So I decided to go into the mom's apple pie version of healing chemistry rather than the Darth Vader version of healing chemistry. And as I started to explore using food and using vitamins and nutrients to help heal my patients when I graduated pharmacy school, I realized that I was getting reversals of the disease process that Darth Vader chemistry couldn't achieve. And when I started to think about all the many hours and many classes that I was taking that I took in pharmacy school, studying the poisonous nature of drugs, the toxic nature of drugs, it finally clicked on me: why the heck would I, as a pharmacist who wanted to use chemistry to heal the body, why would I ever dabble or go near Darth Vader chemistry, pharmacological chemistry, when I have not only a benign tool at my disposal, but a benign and powerful tool at my disposal, namely diet and supplementation. So I built a business, a pharmacy actually, around nutrition and around supplementation and around skincare and around herbs, no drugs. And I started this back in about 5 years after I graduated pharmacy school, back in 1991. And I just recently sold it. And over the course of 25 years, my business morphed from a business where I was providing people with raw materials, with hardware to change their lives, to reverse diseases, to feel better or to prevent disease or to have better athletic performance. My business started to morph from providing them hardware with providing them software. In other words, it morphed from providing them with hardware products, the literal supplements and the literal skincare products, to providing them with information, to providing them with ideas. And I went from selling hardware from providing hardware to providing hardware and software. And
I actually like the way you put that, because the body itself is an actual computer. It's a biological computer.
Absolutely. Not only that, my friend, check this out, okay? Yes, you're absolutely right. The body is a computer, but it's even deeper than that, because the body is a macro computer made up of trillions, 100 trillion microprocessors, microcomputers, each of which has a computing power that is so staggering that we are centuries away from being able to duplicate it, if ever, through our technology. And that's the microprocessing capabilities of a cell and a cell membrane. At the end of the day, the human body is created by the cooperative, synergistic effects of 100 trillion independent, but somehow cooperating microprocessors producing proteins, producing hardware, producing substances in response to the manipulation of information that comes into the system via the central nerve, via the brain.
That's the sort of thing that Ray Kurzweil at Google must absolutely have dreams about.
Ray Kurzweil is one of the guys that I've studied, actually. And by the way, Ray Kurzweil gets a lot of grief, but Ray Kurzweil is just reporting from he's just a messenger. Ray Kurzweil is just bringing to light what is ahead, the kind of technological advances that await us in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, not very far. Have you read The Singularity is Near, or you're familiar with The Singularity? I don't know if you guys have talked about that at all.
I'm familiar with it, yes. I have not read it, but yes.
Okay, well, the singularity is not near. The singularity is here. We are at a point now where information is doubling pretty much every day, if not every hour, maybe even every minute at this point. Because once it starts to go exponential, it goes from changing every 10 years to every 5 years to every 1 year to every minute, within seconds practically, within a very short period of time, as that curve becomes parabolic, if you know what I'm saying, as it starts to go straight up, as the parabola starts to become a straight line, an asymptote, as they call it in mathematics. The point is, it happens really, really fast, and it's here. But biology, the biological system, the divine system, has figured out how to do what we're just now figuring out 3.5 billion years ago. So the human biological system is 3.5 billion years ahead of the game. So we're now figuring out how to create artificial life. We're creating three-dimensional printing machines. Now they have three-dimensional printing machines that print food. Well, guess what? We have biological life, that is cellular life, and 3D printing machines, systems that can produce hardware based on software, based on information, 3.5 billion years ago, and that's what a cell is. A cell is a miniature 3D printing machine. It prints proteins without our interference. All we have to do is feed the system, breathe the system, and keep the system pristine and clean. Keep the system from becoming toxic. And these individual 3D printing machines, these trillions of individual 3D printing machines, will somehow, in an emergent fashion, in this unbelievable cooperative fashion, produce these elements, what we call proteins, produce these elements in response to information with perfection at the perfect to the nanoscopic degree, even smaller, the femtoscopic degree, to the trillionth of a meter or even more. And that's the kind of perfection that we're talking about. And it does it on its own. We can't, not only can't we do anything to fix it or to adjust it or to manipulate it, all we can do is screw it up. And that's the problem with medicine. Medicine is one of the most arrogant, boneheaded attempts to manipulate a perfect system that you could ever imagine. How dare we come in with a prescription drug that is in effect a biological sledgehammer, and to come into a system that is so finely tuned that it's accurate to the trillionth, to the zillionth of a gram or to a meter, and expect this sledgehammer pharmacological intervention to do anything but damage the system? Is it possible? It's the equivalent of taking a shotgun to try to take care of a bacteria. That's the scale difference between how we're trying to treat the body and how the body is working. We can only interfere with the system to the system's detriment once we do anything but feed it, breathe it, and detoxify it, or help it detoxify or allow it to detoxify itself. We can only interfere with it to its detriment through all of our surgeries and radiations and pharmacological interventions. All of our medical strategies, all of our modern medical strategies can only disrupt and destroy the system. And It is self-evident is the tragedy. It is self-evident and obvious to anybody who has two eyes. This is why we have a system that has more doctoring than any other culture in the history of mankind, yet we are simultaneously the sickest culture in the history of mankind, with more obesity and childhood obesity and diabetes and cancer and heart disease and autoimmune disease and degenerative disease than we even had people 10,000 years ago. Now, we have as many people who are sick today as we had people on the planet probably 20 or 30,000 years ago. That's the extent of the disease state, of our disease state, and it is all with the complicity of the modern medical model that is so proud of itself, that loves itself so much. It's a wonder why it doesn't get arthritis from patting itself on the back so much about how wonderful it is. Oh, we're doctors, and go see your doctor and make sure you check with your doctor. It's even part of the culture. It's like, oh, he married a doctor. Oh, she's a doctor. Oh, he's a doctor. We have this idea that, oh, they're doctors. Like doctoring is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, guess what? What does it mean to doctor, Kev? When you go to court and you tell the judge, oh, here's the evidence, judge, it's doctored. Is that a good thing?
No, it means it's been tampered with. It's been hijacked.
Exactly. It's been the doctor is to commit a fraud. If you have your tax forms, you take them to your tax guy and you say these taxes are doctored, he'll tell you those are fraudulent. And that's what doctoring is. Doctoring pretends to create health when it does nothing of the kind. Doctoring is like painting over your rotting walls with white paint and then saying, here's your beautiful new room. Isn't it beautiful? No, all it is rotting walls with a little bit of paint on top. And that's what the pharmacological model is about. That's what the radiation model is about, the surgical model is about, and unfortunately that's what the entire medical model is about. It's about doctoring. It's about pretending that we have health by manipulating statistics and by manipulating numbers, playing games with people's heads, obfuscation and confusion. It is just such dirty pool that I have personally dedicated my professional life, my spiritual life, my personal life to exposing this scam and helping people really take care of themselves. Because at the end of the day, because of the nature of the healing nature of the human body, the body is designed to heal. It's homeostatically designed to adjust itself, to bring the ups down and the downs up, just like a thermostat does. And if it didn't have this mechanism, you guys, we couldn't have survived the 2 million years that we've made it on planet Earth, or at least 500,000, depending on which species you want to say, or even 100,000. If we didn't have this homeostatic mechanism that healed cuts automatically, that adjusted blood pressure and adjusted fluid maintenance and opened up blood vessels and allowed the nervous system to function the way it functions, on its own, we couldn't have survived. We couldn't have made it. And we made it without doctors. We've only had doctors for a couple of thousand years or so. And really only for the last 100 or 150 years it's really only progressed. But the human body is 100,000 to 500,000 years old, and even longer if you want to go way back into evolutionary history. And there were no doctors, but the system took care of itself. And so you and I, are the end products of that evolutionary process that is perfect, that is designed perfectly. We don't need to do anything but get out of the way. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say we seem to be attacked from all sides because we're getting drugs off a doctor that doesn't actually heal the problem.
No.
It doesn't.
It creates more of a burden. It creates more of a burden on the body.
And it just makes it you don't feel the pain, but the actual thing is still there.
Yes, and it's shortening our lives. The actual thing is still there. And what's worse is not only is the actual thing still there, but now you put an extra load on the body, an extra burden on the body that the body now has to deal with. So you've already got a stressed out system, a system that is somehow disrupted, that's somehow disturbed, and now you put something else in the system that now the system has to account for, namely a pharmacological drug, or God forbid if they take out an organ or they take out part of your body, now your body has to figure out how to deal with whatever it has to deal with the ups and downs of life, with the activities of biology without a gallbladder, or with only one kidney, or without whatever organ they decided to remove, a female reproductive system or a breast or whatever they took out. So whatever kind of doctoring you're getting, whatever kind of medicine you're being treated with. And by the way, I'm not talking about infections here. I'm talking about chronic degenerative disease, the kind of disease where we just don't get better. We just keep tumbling in this downward spiral of breakdown. Whatever your degenerative disease is, and listen up because this is very important and very powerful. Whatever your degenerative disease is, the only thing medicine can do, the only thing the modern medical model can do is make it worse. Do you understand this? This is so powerful. If you have arthritis, if you have bursitis, if you have fibromyalgia or MS or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or any whatever Latin mumbo jumbo they tell you, the only thing the medical model can do is make it worse. They cannot make it better. They can only make it worse. However, it doesn't really matter because we don't need the medical model. We could do it ourselves. Because if doctoring can only make it worse, the problem is always in something that we're doing. It's always in something that we are complicit in. It's always in something that we are putting into the system. The body operates perfectly until we put things into the system. And what are those things that we put into the system? Well, not accounting, and I don't mean to marginalize this, but I just don't want to talk about it right now, but it's still very important. Spirituality, mentality, and our emotions, in other words, our spiritual natures, our mental natures, and our thought nature, and our feeling natures, all of these play a major role in how the body shows up. Our thoughts are turned into hormones and then into the human body. Our feelings are turned into hormones and then into the human body. And our spirituality ultimately becomes our human body. But I don't want to talk about that right now. From a physical standpoint, the only things we need to consider, and just as important as what I just said was how medicine can only interfere and disrupt and disturb the system, this is equally important because this is the antidote. If we're not healing, if we're degenerating, we're suffering from a degenerative disease, it means we're putting something into the system, and that something is, aside from food, aside from thoughts and emotions and spirituality, that something is always going to be food and nutrition, oxygen, and toxicity. And those are the only three elements that need to be addressed for all disease. That is the secret to healing all degenerative disease. Understanding food and nutrition, understanding respiration and oxygenation, and understanding toxicity. And by the way, sugar, once it reaches past a very small amount, becomes a toxin. And that's probably the major toxin that we in the Western world, and perhaps all over the world, all over the planet at this point in time, at this point in history, it's the major toxin that we have to address, is sugar. And make no mistake about it, it does no good to rail against the New World Order or to rail against the medical mafia and then to try to get by through, deal with your life by munching on Snickers bars and drinking Coke and all the other multitude of ways that we interface with sugar.
And so Ben, it's an absolute crime that people are offered, they're told, a safe alternative in aspartame.
Right.
Because that's just as bad, if not worse.
It's, I don't know which one it is. It's either just as bad or it's worse. It's one or the other.
And they gave it a new name to make it sound better. I think they called it
Equal.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like renaming Al Qaeda
or something.
It's like renaming Al Qaeda ISIS. But John, do you want to tell Ben about the average life expectancy in one area here in Glasgow, just to give him an example of what it's like living here?
Yeah, and Ben, this is actually about 5 minutes, literally, from where myself and Kev stay, and the life expectancy is 63.
That's horrific. Or is there a lot of alcohol? Is there a lot of alcohol?
There's a lot of alcohol, but the thing is, I think there's a lot of the diet as well, because people eat, they sell food here, it's like yellow label, and it's like the cheapest of the cheap.
That's awful. That's awful.
But the thing is, Ben, that money is so tight just now because there's no jobs.
Lot of money. You don't need a lot of money. Let me tell you, one of the best ways to restore yourself to health, to reduce inflammation, to build your immune system, to maintain longevity or to increase longevity is free and cheap. It's free and available. It's free and readily available. You know what it is? It's called fasting. Oh. The less food you eat, the longer you will live. The less work you give your digestive system, the quicker your degenerative disease will improve. The less work you give your digestive system, the less likely you will be to have a degenerative disease. The less work you give your digestive system, the stronger or the more resources your body will have to defend itself. The stronger the body's immune system will become. The hardest thing we do to ourselves on a regular basis is eat. And the reason this is so is because we have created an empire of food. We have empires of food throughout history. And all of the great empires, from the Sumerian Empire, which, by the way, appeared magically on the planet. Nobody really knows how that happened. From the Sumerian Empire through the Egyptian Empire to the Roman Empire to the European Empire to the British Empire to the American Empire, all of these empires were empires of grain, empires of sugar, empires of food, empires that depended on the dumbing down and the manipulation of their people through biochemical hacking, the biochemical hacking powers of foods, specifically grains and sugars, which not only contain sugars, but also contain opiates. They call them endopiates or endorphins, exorphins, which are similar to the opiates that are produced in your brain, but they're found in grains. And so we developed a power structure that depends on us eating endlessly. Not just eating, but eating endlessly. And so what we can do to restore our health as well as to restore our independence is break free of the tyranny of food.
Breaking free of the tyranny of food. I couldn't have put it any better myself. We'll be back after these short messages. Don't go anywhere, folks.
I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny. I want it all my freedom and liberty. I'll keep my guns, you can keep your security. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny. I want it all my freedom and liberty. I'll keep my guns, you can keep your security. I'll stand tall in the face of tyranny.
Welcome back to the second half of tonight's broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on www.truthfrequencyradio.com. Right after this show, my good friend, fellow host on the network, Joe Joseph, will be live with the Freedom Link, and he's got one of his friends on tonight, and they're going to be covering all the latest news, doing the rounds right now. Now, we've got Mr. Ben Fuchs on tonight. I've opened up the phone lines for you to phone in with your questions for Ben, and the number is 1-866-37-TRUTH, 1-866-37-TRUTH. So please, please, please get your calls in now. Now, Ben, I was going over your website today, and I was quite surprised. It was pharmacistben.com.
Okay.
And I was quite surprised when I came across the Eye of Horus symbol.
Oh, you like that?
And even more surprised when I actually found its connection to the pharmaceutical. Pharmacy. Yeah. Would you like to just talk about that just now until we hopefully get a caller on the line?
Yeah. Say that again, sir. You have a caller?
No, just until we get a caller on the line. It would be interesting if you could just cover that for the listeners.
The whole link between the Eye of Horus and pharmacy?
Yeah, on this show here, usually on a Friday, that's the kind of stuff we go into, and it's quite an interesting connection. That's why I was quite surprised to find it on your site.
Yeah, it's traditionally, it's been said, at least in pharmacy school, it was said that the RX symbol evolved from the Eye of Horus. And the Eye of Horus is a very powerful symbol. Horus was one of the Egyptian gods of healing, and so the Eye of Horus was associated with healing power. But it could be associated with a lot more. The Eye of Horus could also be associated with the pineal gland, and the pineal gland has a lot to do with the structure of reality. The pineal gland makes the ultimate drug, which is known as dimethyltryptamine or DMT. In fact, the pineal gland makes all the drugs that we create our reality, that we structure our reality with, specifically serotonin, melatonin, as well as DMT and various tryptamine-type drugs. These are all drugs that are thought to be involved with light and dark, or the fundamental polarity of night and day, light and dark, good and bad. And all of these are linked through the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus represents a sort of center point between the primal dualities of life. And pharmacy, or medicine, is really about adjusting the dualities. That's what I was talking about earlier about homeostasis, how the body pulls the ups downs and downs up. That's the natural that's the natural process of things. All of life is about pulling the ups downs and pulling the ups down and the downs life, like a thermostat does. And that's called homeostasis. Well, medicine and science in general and technology are really about creating a second nature. Do you ever talk about this? How technology, this is what artificial intelligence is. It's about becoming God. It's about creating a second nature. And so the RX symbol is a way of expressing mankind's attempt to become homeostatic, to do what the body does naturally, to do what the natural world does automatically. The RX symbol represents man's version of that, the AI version of homeostasis. Did I explain that well? Does that make sense?
Yeah, what's your thoughts on AI, Ben? Because I've heard it's...
The tube is out of the toothpaste. The toothpaste is out of the tube.
Definitely. It was Elon Musk just recently said about how it was basically letting a demon out of the bottle, and we're not too successful when we try that in the past.
Listen, to what you want to hear in a big picture, this is what's happening. We're creating a mankind version of the natural world. So the natural world evolves there's an evolutionary process. The natural world evolves in a certain way, and ultimately it's formed us. But what has now happened over the last probably maybe 12,000 years or so, what's happened, at least in this cycle, maybe it happened before, is we have become godlike. We have now we've created DNA, we've created cells, we've created artificial intelligence, we've merged the life force with the cybernetic force, we have created an artificial nervous system, which is what the internet is. And so what we have done is we've created a mankind version of what God has created, almost like a Tower of Babel. The metaphor of the Tower of Babel, where man tries to become God, is what we've actually accomplished, or at least we're pretty darn close to accomplishing, and AI is the culmination of that. The great irony of it is that AI will probably ultimately, in the course of hundreds of years anyway, will become the next stage in evolution, the way Cro-Magnon was the next stage in evolution after Neanderthal. So in essence, we have created our successors from an evolutionary perspective, and in a big picture sense, it was probably inevitable that it would happen. I mean, how else could it have stopped? It started back when we started to manipulate the world through genetics back in 12,000 years ago, when they started to grow crops, and its culmination now is we manipulate humanity. We not only manipulate plants or animals, we manipulate the human species itself, and that's basically what artificial intelligence is. So I see it as inevitable. I see it as the beginnings of our demise as as Homo sapiens, if you will, Homo sapiens sapiens, and whether it's a good thing or bad thing, Kev, you know what? You and I aren't going to be around to know about it.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. There's so many different ways of looking at it. The advantages that it could contain for mankind is amazing, but in the hands of the psychopaths that are about just now, Ben, it really worries me.
Well, do you know who Carl Sagan was?
Yes, I do, yes.
Okay, so Carl Sagan talked about civilizations and grades of civilizations.
Yeah, type 0, type 1.
Yes. So a type 1 civilization, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm going back on memory, type 1 civilization was a civilization that figured out how to utilize the energy of a planet, type 2 to utilize the energy of a star, type 3 to utilize the energy of a galaxy, something like that. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, that's the one, yeah.
Okay, so he said humanity was like 0.2 or 0.3, okay? So when we get to be 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, we'll finally understand that there has to be a balance between the good of the individual and the good of the group. You can't have the good of the group supersede the good of the individual. You can't have the good of the individual supersede the group, and you can't legislate it. It doesn't work. It has to happen intuitively. There has to be a certain plugged-in nature that we have to understand when the group benefit when we need to be operating in the interest of the group and when we need to be operating in the interest of the individual. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is a very subtle knowing. This is an intuitive knowing that requires a sort of cognitive leap, a cognitive evolutionary leap that I'm hoping will come. Now, this is a hypothesis. I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly based on the idea that systems evolve and systems get better and systems get more refined, based on the fact that Carl Sagan, a guy as brilliant as Carl Sagan, validates this idea. I personally believe that until we figure out how to get along in a group sense without sacrificing our individual nature. Do you hear the difference there? That's a very important point. We can't sacrifice individuality and novelty and uniqueness and idiosyncrasy in the interest of the group, but you can't sacrifice the group in order for the individual to flourish. There has to be an intuitive understanding of the balance of those two natures. There's a really cool book.
That's the word right there, Ben. It's all about balance. This is we were talking about this last night, and this AI and everything else, and our fear is that we rely too much on the technological advances, and we take our eye off what is around us, what is naturally here, what is indigenous to this planet.
Yes,
Now,
and there's plenty.
Going back to the kind of medical kind of stuff, we hear a lot about the uses and the wonders of stuff like cannabis oil in the media. Do you agree? Do you think that's...
Well, here's the thing on cannabis, How dare a government tell its people what it can pull out of the earth and smoke and eat and do what it likes to do with? How dare a federal authority, or any authority for that matter, tell an individual? This is where the balance between the state and the individual has to kick in. The state has become so dominant and so hegemonous and so monstrous that the individual is not only squashed, but the individual has completely given up. The individual, with the exception of little pockets like Truth Frequency Radio and Alex Jones and a few of us out there, the individual has become so squashed by this huge footprint of the state that we just accept as normal that a government can tell you what you can smoke and what you could eat and what you can drink. But when you think about it, Kev, where does an authority trip get the temerity, the cojones, to tell people what they can smoke? Now, I think smoking happens to be terrible. And I don't smoke, and I think it's an awful thing to do to your body. But nobody can tell you what to smoke, especially if it comes out of the earth. It's a plant. What if they made bananas illegal? You can never have a banana. You go to jail for 10 years if you eat bananas, right? Would we accept that? It said if you have lettuce on your hamburgers, you go to jail for 10 years. You go to court, you lose your house, you got to spend thousands of dollars on lawyers because you had lettuce in your hamburger. Would that ever be acceptable to anybody? But yet, because marijuana happens to alter your consciousness to a certain extent, and for whatever reason, it makes you feel happy or sad or tired or relaxed or whatever it makes you feel, the government, we accept a federal government, an authority telling you that you can or cannot do that. That's obscene.
Well, it's absolutely a constant bombardment of negative propaganda when it comes to marijuana and cannabis in this country. And the latest one, Ben, is they're actually trying to tell us now that it physically shrinks the grey matter.
So fine. You tell them, I want to shrink my grey matter. That's my business.
That's my exact response to that.
That's not your business. That's
they
not
must have
your
it wrong.
Business. Yeah, I don't care if it's, first of all, it's absurd. And I remember I read that this morning as well. It actually increases white matter. They say it may be. It's a medicine, it's a drug. So, but that's nobody's business if I want to shrink my gray matter or if I want to expand my gray matter. It's not the government's business. And this is what we as individuals have to begin to understand is we've abdicated our personal obligations and personal responsibilities and personal liberties and told the government that as long as they take care of us, as long as they give us a modicum of a piece of so-called security, we will completely give up our freedom and our independence. And that's the problem. And that's partial laziness and it's partial hypnotic entrancement.
Ben, but do you not think that we're actually meant to have cannabis if we've got cannabinoid receptors in our brain already?
Of course. You're making yourself illegal. You might as well make you illegal. That's how stupid it is. There's another. DMT is the same way. How do you make something illegal if your brain makes it? How does that happen? That's the utter stupidity of it. We have made ourselves illegal. We have created a system where we are illegal to ourselves. We're creating a war on ourselves. This is a metaphor. And everywhere we look, we are fighting ourselves. New York City takes its fecal material from its 10 million inhabitants, and it puts it in a pipe and spews it 5 miles out into the ocean. That's what New York City does with its waste. And now New York City is completely shocked that mountain of feces is drifting back to New York City. This is the world we've created. We've created a world where we spew oil into the ocean, and now the ocean has more dead zones than it has live zones in parts in the Gulf of Mexico, for example. This is the world that we've created where we fight ourselves. We create wars with ourselves. And it's all metaphorical in a fractal-like way at multiple higher and higher levels. How does one species of mankind create war with another species of man? Or how does one country create war with another country when we're all the same species?
And you see, Ben, here's the danger with AI, because how long is it going to take for this supercomputer to realize that the biggest threat to this planet is us?
Yeah. There's this funny radio show called, what's it called? Cyberpunk Radio. You ever hear Cyberpunk Radio?
Yeah.
Have you listened to it? They do this. It's hysterical, right? It's supposedly this world run by computers, and they had this little commercial or little blurb where the computer is going, "Silly human bitches." He goes, "Silly human bitches," just like that. And that's exactly what I think. Of course, they're going to think we're idiots. We're stupid. Look at what we're doing. What if the cells of the liver decide to have a fight with the cells of the lung? They should be more like a liver. No, they should be more like a lung. No, look at those liver people. Look at those. They're all livery, and we're all lungy, and we're right, and they're wrong. The human being would not have made it. And likewise with the culture. The culture is not going to make it if we have these adversarial relationships. But the irony is the system is built on adversarial relationships. Do you understand this? The world is built on us against them, on country against country, on buyer against seller, on customer against businessman, against doctor against patient, and government against citizen, and police against criminal. And everywhere you look, there are these antagonistic adversarial relationships. And the idiocy is what's expected to arise out of these adversarial relationships is a more fine-tuned and refined system. And that's not what happens. What happens at the end of the day with these adversarial relationships is you end up with a lot of dead people and a lot of suffering people. So what I'm saying is we have to understand cooperation, we have to understand synergy, we have to understand how to be able to blend together into a harmonious kind of orchestra rather than this chaotic cacophony that's more like the sound of the orchestra when it's warming up. We have to understand, this is part of evolution, by the way, because I believe it's going to happen. I believe we're going to go from a 0.2 to a 0.3 and 4 and 5 and ultimately to a 1.0. But Kev, it's not going to be me and you. And I'm sorry I didn't catch what's the other gentleman's name there?
John.
John.
Kevin John, it's not going to be the three of us. And this is what the power structure knows good and well. You see, corporations live forever. The power structure, they think in terms of millennia. And they know that Kevin, John, and Ben are only going to get 100 years, and we're going to be dead and gone. So they're planning in terms of millennia. They're not planning in terms of our little lives. You know what? We have 100 years, maybe, probably more like 70 or 80, and the last 20 years or 10 years or 5 years we're falling apart. So really, we don't get much time, but the structure itself gets forever. And that's how it's thinking in those terms. So ultimately, we have to depend on an evolutionary leap that takes place almost independent of us. And I believe that'll happen. I believe in the powerful nature of evolution. And I believe it's going to take place that we'll finally get our crap together in a quantum leap sort of sense. You know, it'll be like in systems theory. What happens you ever hear systems theory in physics?
No, I haven't heard that one, no.
Systems theory studies how systems evolve and how systems work and how systems interact and how systems grow. And one of the principles of systems theory says that a system will take in as much energy as it can. Systems like to stay stable. They don't like to go change. They don't like to go up, and they don't like to go down. They like to remain stable. It's like I was talking earlier, how the biological system always wants to keep stability. Well, all systems like to maintain stability. But what happens is when you put energy into a system, that energy has a disruptive nature. So what a system will do is it will absorb as much energy as it can take, and then all of a sudden it will change rapidly. This is how water boils. So if you turn your pot of water on the stove and you turn the heat on, nothing will happen. Even though that water is starting to get hotter and hotter and hotter, nothing will happen. The heat from the fire will go into the water, and the water molecules will suck up the heat and suck up the heat and suck up the heat, and that's called latent heat. That's because it's not doing anything. It's just getting sucked up until all of a sudden the water critical mass is reached and the water boils. And then the water will boil, and that'll be a new system. And then that new system will stay the same until some other input creates some kind of critical mass, kicks in, and another change happens. And that's how systems evolve and systems change. Well, I believe that the evolutionary system is the same way. And we're taking in energy now, and this energy is in a form of disruption. It looks like the world's falling apart. We got viruses, and we got government tyranny, and we've got the New World Order, and we've got degenerative diseases and crappy food and crime and all these horrible things. And that represents heat that's coming into the water, into the cauldron. And the cauldron is staying the same, and it's staying stable, as that energy gets sucked in. And all of a sudden, what's going to happen is we're going to take an evolutionary leap. And I believe we're in it right now, personally. And I believe that's what a lot of we're starting to feel a lot of that. That's why things are starting to get exposed. And I believe we're in this evolutionary leap right now. And I believe within 100 years or so, and like I say, we're not going to be around, but this is just what appears to me, what's going to take shape. We're going to take that evolutionary leap, and it'll probably have something to do with a blending of hardware, of computer processors and biological cells. And I believe that's already happened. I believe they already have cells that they've blended some kind of microprocessing chips with. And that represents the beginnings of this new stage. It takes about 100 years, maybe even 200 years for all to take place. But I believe within 100 or 200 years, we're going to be in this maybe 0.6 level, or even maybe more, maybe 0.7 or 0.8, where we will learn to get along, where we will understand that this is one planet, where we will understand that we're one species, we're all the same species, where we will understand that there's more to be gained as individuals by cooperating than there is to be gained by fighting with each other. The power structure gains by us fighting, by the way. Okay? That they want us fighting. They love it when everybody fights. They gain a lot when we fight. But not in the individual's nature. It's in the individual's nature to cooperate. Because you know what will happen when we cooperate? We won't need a government. When we cooperate, we won't need police. And this is what Jesus said 2,000 years ago. He said there's 2 laws. There's not a bunch of laws. There's not a lot of complication here, people. This is very simple. You love God, whatever that is for you. Love the divine force. Love nature. Love whatever, all that is, however you want to metaphorize it, whatever your terms are. And you love each other. And that's how you do it. And that is all you need. And I personally believe, and I don't know if I could prove it, but I personally believe it, that within 100 to 200 years, we'll finally get our act together and we'll understand that when you love God and love your neighbor, when you do a few simple things, when you learn to be cooperative instead of adversarial and antagonistic, that we'll all be better off as individuals, and the policeman will have to get a new job, and the president will have to get a new job, and the government, your government bureaucrats will have to find meaningful work and meaningful productive labor, and we'll all live happily ever after, at least for a little bit, until the next challenge comes.
Well, that sounds like absolutely.
I'm going with that. I'm going with that. I'm going with that,
I mean,
John.
Yeah, I would love it. Ben, going back to.
By the way, let me say one last thing. I call my radio program The Bright Side. I don't know if you saw that.
I was listening to one of those episodes today. It's over on GCN. It's really good.
It's called The Bright Side, though, because I want people to understand. Yes, I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not an ostrich with my head in the sand. I see what's happening, and I'm paying attention. I'm watching what's happening in the world and how it seems to be falling apart. But there's a bright side, and that's what everything I just talked about. How this idea that we can turn this thing around and we can ultimately learn how to cooperate the way our cells cooperate. This is a model for cooperation in our human bodies. We have a template for how systems can cooperate, and I personally believe that that's feasible and that's possible. And all it takes is a decision. All it takes is a willingness and a decision to do. And once we get that, once we're willing, and once we just decide that's how we want to live, that's what will happen. And that's why I call my program The Bright Side. It's the good news, and that's what this is really all about to me. I want this to be a positive message, not a negative message.
Yeah, I think I got that tangy tangerine for a diet supplement for my partner. But I found out through that vitamins are absolutely amazing, because June goes through these hot flushes and they're really, really bad. Now, she's tried everything from a doctor, everything, and nothing ever worked. And yet, 1 week after taking tangy tangerine,
isn't that amazing?
It was gone.
Isn't that amazing? Let me tell you something. One of the coolest things about the human body is the more nutritionally deficient you are, the faster your body absorbs those nutrients. In the same fashion that a dry sponge sucks up more water than a wet sponge, when your body is nutritionally deficient like a dry sponge, it sucks up nutrients super fast. So you living in Scotland, you're telling me about the food and the agriculture and the
lack of vitamin D, because we have no sunshine.
All of it, that's right. The lack of vitamin D, etc. When you told me about that, that tells me that you're probably running into some serious, severe, even more than we are here, nutritional deficiencies in Scotland. Which means that you will notice Scottish people who drink Beyond Tangy Tangerine will notice results from the BTT, the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, very quickly.
Well,
that's a
I
good
sound
point.
like Alex Jones here, but I actually did have a glass up in John's. The first mouthful, I must admit, I didn't know what to make of it. And then by the end of it, John, I was looking for more. I was actually looking for more of it.
Yeah, that's great. Alex, by the way, Alex, he was the same way. Alex was a skeptic, and he never really did anything, and that's how he got into this thing. He started doing Beyond Tangy Tangerine, and then some of his people started to lose massive amounts of weight. I don't know if you heard any of this. Of this. All right, and they were all shocked. But I'm not shocked because I'm the guy who gets the letters. I've been getting the letters for 17 years because I've been working with this company now for 17 years, right? And proudly representing the longevity company. I get the letters because I'm one of the spokespeople. So I see it over, and I do presentations. I talk to large groups of people. So I see this over and over and over again. And I know to the individual like yourself or somebody who experiences this, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm losing weight. 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, 100 pounds. I'm off my medicine. I'm not going to have the surgery. My blood pressure is dropping. You guys are shocked, the individual shocked. But me, check this out. I hear it over and over and over and over and over, countless times. So I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell people about this. I could not look at myself. It's not fair for me not to tell you about this. It's not fair for me not to spread the word. And just like that's true about the longevity company and the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and all these incredible products that we talk about on the program and that you're experiencing yourself, it's true about these ideas. The ideas that if you stop eating as much food, you reduce your intake of fast-burning sugars. You make sure you're relaxing your body, you're breathing. Make sure you're getting enough vitamins and minerals and nutrients, all your cofactors as well as your macronutrients, your protein, your fats, and your carbohydrates. Make sure you're thinking correct thoughts, feeling correct feelings. Make sure you're plugged into the divine force, whatever you want to call the divine force. These are things that we can do ourselves that have such tremendous healing power, that have such tremendous potency when it comes to wellness and regeneration and just feeling good about life. And just like it's true about the BTT, it's true about all of these other concepts. And just like it's true how I could not live with myself if I didn't expose the simplicity and the ease of getting back to feeling great and getting back to being healthy without doctors and without drugs. I couldn't live with myself.
Ben, that's almost caught up in us. I'm sorry to cut you off there, sir. But what an energy you have about you. Really, really positive energy. I've personally loved it. Do you want to give your show, what time it is, a shout out, and also your websites?
Yeah. The show is called The Bright Side. It's on GCN, and I can tell you it's on live from 10 a.m. From 9 a.m. Mountain Time to 10 a.m. Mountain Time every day. But if you just go to brightsideben.com, just click on the streaming or the listen now or the archives. I've got 3.5-4 years of archives, and I really go into the human body from a scientific perspective, but more from a love perspective, from a passionate.
Ben, I'm hoping you'll be back sometime real soon, because the amount of information that you contain, I didn't actually appreciate that you went into. Absolutely fascinating, sir. Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight. Remember to stay tuned for Joe Joseph right after the break. And wherever you are, make it TFR.
Didn't touch that dial.